Hello. In 1907, during the construction of the Brooklands motor racing track in Surrey, workmen uncovered the remains of a prehistoric village. The objects they found included a bronze bucket and a hoard of Roman coins. But perhaps the most interesting discovery of all was the remains of a furnace dating from 5th century BC and used for smelting iron. The Brooklands furnace was the earliest evidence of iron production yet discovered in Britain. Until the beginning of the first millennium BC, tools had been mainly made from bronze. The introduction of ironworking to Europe in the following centuries was one of the great technological breakthroughs of history, and the beginning of the Iron Age was accompanied by significant changes in societies, lifestyles and cultures across the continent. With me to discuss the dawn of the European Iron Age are Timothy Champion, Professor of Archaeology at the University of Southampton, Sue Hamilton, Professor of Prehistory at the Institute of Archaeology, University College London, and Barry Cunliffe, Emeritus Professor of European Archaeology at the Institute of Archaeology at the University of Oxford. Tim Champion, prehistory is commonly divided into three eras: the Stone Age, the Bronze Age, the Iron Age. What exactly do those terms mean, and how did that classification originate?
Well, the classification started in Denmark in the early 19th century as a means of trying to find order in the rapidly accumulating evidence of prehistory. It was building up in what was then called the Museum of Northern Antiquities, which is now the National Museum of Denmark in Copenhagen. And it was the work of the curator called Christian Thomsen, who noticed that among this mass of material there were sort of three groups, and with very little other lines of evidence about how to order them, he suggested that what we had was three successive phases where different materials were used as the prime material for making everyday tools and weapons. So a Stone Age, a Bronze Age and an Iron Age, as represented in the finds they had in the museum. And that was how he displayed them in the museum.
And that caught on very quickly, didn't it?
With some opposition at first. Other people had other ideas derived from the classical or biblical chronologies, but...
And what would those be?
Well, in Britain, for instance, in England, we had a history of Roman conquest with the conquest in 43 AD, and everything before that was lumped together as ancient British. And there was a very short chronology. People didn't realise how long prehistory was. So the idea that you needed separate ages in a short prehistory, even that seemed strange to some people. But yes, it did eventually catch on, and by about the 1860s it was accepted by most people, and people were beginning to put absolute dates on it.
We're interested this morning in the transition from the Bronze Age to the Iron Age. Can you give us some approximation of when that occurred? I realise these dates are not only long ago, but very approximate. But
very approximate.
Given that, yeah.
Well, I think the first thing is it happened at slightly different times in different parts of Europe, but probably the earliest transition would be in southeast Europe, in Greece, from about 1050 BC, and in Western Europe, including Britain, from about 750 BC.
So, Hamilton, the Bronze Age began in Europe around 3,300 BC. Let's consider, is that right? Let's consider the metal, well, around there, you correct me, please do. But after that, let's consider the metal first of all. Tell us about bronze and how it's made and what significance it has.
Well, I think the key thing about bronze is that it isn't iron, and I think it's very easy to lump metals together as if they all function in the same way, and conceptually they may have been considered to be quite different things by prehistoric societies. So bronze is synthetic. It's a combination of copper as its main ingredient, and added to that is tin, maybe up to 8 or 9% of the mixture. And that takes us through to the later Bronze Age, till about maybe 1300 BC, when something else is added, which is lead, and it's added up to about 3%. So it's a synthetic material. It's made of several materials brought together. And the key to adding them is that it changes the quality of the copper. The copper is soft and malleable, and with some contamination it becomes harder. So tin is added to make it harder, but too much tin will make it brittle. So there's a mixture that has to be achieved.